Hello everybody, my name is Suzanne Price. I am the author of these books as well as many others. These are going to show up actually with the text backwards because I'm filming on my camera, but this one is called Relieve Your Stress, Anxiety, Burnout, Panic Attacks and Agoraphobia the same way I did, and this is the Stress and Burnout Awareness and Prevention Guide. I also have several other books and programs coming up in the new year of 2022. Or a great deal of what I've been working on in this last while is relevant to what has been going on in the world and the amount of fear that is being caused or has been caused since the beginning of the rollout of the pandemic event in 2020. With that said, I am on a mission to help humanity rise above this blanket of fear which has been weighing down on everybody since the rollout of this pandemic event. And as part of my effort, I've decided to do this series of videos, which I have called Powering Down the Fear Machine. I am going to keep these videos very short and sweet, and I'm going to keep them on point. So I will do my best to just address one issue at a time. I will ask, though, that anybody who is going to be listening to my podcast or watching any of these videos, that you please come with an open mind, because a lot of what I say to do with fear and stress and anxiety and panic attacks and that sort of thing may sound quite new to you, because I have not come from a place where I've been reading other books and regurgitating what I have learned. To be honest with you, I never in a million years thought that I would ever be writing or speaking about the likes of fear or anxiety or any such thing. I never had thought about it. It did not even cross my mind, so I certainly didn't go looking for it. And as I always say, it actually found me. And when I say that, I'm referring to the fact that this happened actually back in the 90s. I walked into work one day, I had a massive panic attack, and it was the most terrifying experience, or one of the most terrifying experiences that I've ever had in my life, because I've had many since. And it was the beginning of what turned out to be a 10-year experience of living with chronic anxiety, debilitating panic attacks, and agoraphobia. And it pretty much brought my life to a standstill. And it seemed almost impossible to overcome. And what happened for me was, I am one of those people who I needed to know what it was, why it happened, how it happened. I needed to know this stuff, and I couldn't get the answers. In fact, my first experience of going for help, I went to a doctor that night, and he stood there watching me trembling and shaking as I was trying to explain to him what had happened to me that day and the symptoms that I still had. And as soon as I stopped to take a breath of air, he just blurted out, "You're pregnant." And he wrote a prescription, handed it to me. It turned out to be for two prescriptions of two different types of medications, which I was told probably by the pharmacist when I got there. The one was for anti-anxiety medications, and the other was for antidepressants. Now, I don't know if that's what they normally do for pregnant women. I was not pregnant. I never thought that I was pregnant. It was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. Regardless, it wasn't good enough for me to just walk away and take those pills. So I ended up going to see another doctor. The next day I went to a female doctor. She did say it was stress, but I had all these questions, and my questions were being ignored. None of my questions were being answered. And so that actually made me worry even more, because the thing is with things like anxiety and stress and fear is that while they're often thought of as being more in the head, they actually have a very, or many physical um, feelings and experiences. It's a very much of a, it's what I call a mind body experience. It is absolutely that, a mind body experience. And so I ended up going in search to get to the bottom of this. I needed to know what it was, because I was actually more concerned originally that it was some sort of physical illness because of all these physical symptoms. And like I say, I wasn't getting the answers that I wanted. And I ended up, after I gave up, actually, after the third or fourth doctor, I can't remember which, and I would just go in and I would walk out with another prescription. And I ended up giving up on that. I went the route of therapy, and I found that it was really bizarre. I was being told regurgitated textbook um, definitions, but nobody was answering any of my questions. And so I went in search for information myself. Now, I will say this was back in the 90s when this began for me, when it started to happen. So we didn't have access to the information that we do today. And so we didn't have the internet, and I ended up having to buy all these books, and most of them were professional textbooks that therapists and doctors and counselors, they were all reading the same stuff. I got most of the books from the UBC bookstore. And what I found was, whoever I went to see as far as a therapist, I was just being told exactly the same thing. And yet none of it made any sense. None of it was answering my questions. And when I was really thinking about it, and I was really thinking about, why is it that they keep saying this is a chemical reaction in the brain, or this is, you just have to change your way of thinking, and yet so many of the symptoms were physical, they were in the body. And it dawned on me, this is a mind body experience. And I realized that we were literally speaking two different languages. I was talking about feelings in the body, and they were talking about, either the doctor's talking about a chemical reaction in the brain, or, change your mind, in other words, talking about the head, which is more of the therapist thing. So from there, I realized that this was a mind body experience, and I started looking into mind body therapies. And to cut a very long story short, I ended up learning different therapies, and I was literally picking apart this whole experience of the thoughts, the feelings, and the different reactions that I was having. And then I was learning all these different therapies, and I was applying them to different things until I finally overcame this. And it took me 10 years to overcome it, but I finally did. And by the time I finished, I realized that I was no longer willing to just overcome this, but I wanted to be more empowered and stronger than I'd ever been before. In fact, I said that I wanted to be unstoppable. After all that was said and done, and everybody was telling me, oh, I should write a book, I should teach, I should do this, and I was not in the least bit interested. But I realized how many people suffer with stress and anxiety and burnout and panic attacks at the best of times. And so I decided to write the first book, which was the Stress and Burnout Awareness and Prevention Guide. Those books are probably about 15 years old. And again, that one's just a very simple lifestyle book. And then after I did that, I realized that there were so many people that were still suffering with all these things, and they just couldn't find the help, they couldn't overcome it. And many people, I mean, there's such a huge part of the population are medicated for stress and anxiety and that sort of thing, and depression. And but they were still not getting any help. They were not getting the help that they needed. So I decided to write the second book, which is Relieve Your Stress, Anxiety, Burnout, Panic Attacks, and Agoraphobia, the same way that I did. And I wasn't necessarily going to do any more about it, I just kept getting pulled back and pulled back and pulled back into it. And I've also written a lot of other books and programs as well, and it was kind of strange because many of them were things that I was not interested in. I didn't really know why I was doing it a lot of the time, but I just had to keep writing, and this stuff kept coming to me. And when this all happened in 2020, I realized it just all seemed to come to me why I'd been doing all of this writing and creating the workshops and everything for so long. And I realized that it was all so relevant to what was happening now. I will be honest that when the pandemic was first rolled out, the pandemic event, as I call it, was first rolled out, I do not think that anybody thought that things were going to go this far, and nor did anybody think that things were going to go on for this long. And it seems that while I'm going to tell you outright right now, this is part of the Great Awakening. Humanity is being liberated right now. You would never know it, but it is part of what is going on. But the process is extremely slow, and it is taking a toll on so many. And I just heard yesterday that the statistics of people suffering with stress and anxiety and depression and also suicide is skyrocketing. I've also recently heard that there's been a lot of suicides in doctors and nurses, and the toll that it's taking on them, and very often they feel as though they've got their hands tied. And so I've decided now to put out this series of videos which I've called it Powering Down the Fear Machine. I am asking anybody that listens to this to please come with an open mind, because as I was saying, my information is not from me reading textbooks or listening to other people's stuff and regurgitating it. I have quite a different approach to so many other people, and it's based more on how I overcome this. But what I really came out of it, what I ended up really deciding was the three things that were really, really important for people to really, really be able to not only get over the stress, overcome the symptoms and sensations and that, but to be able to prevent stress and fear from ever affecting them again, is that we need basically three things. We need to really be able to identify what that fear is and where it's coming from. Because believe it or not, while they say that babies are born with two fears, I actually do not completely agree with that. But let's go with that for now. They say that babies are born with two fears. One is the fear of being dropped or falling from a height, and the other one is loud noises. If you think about it, by the time anybody is a teenager, in these days, much younger even, we are literally riddled with so many fears and anxieties. So this is why it is so important to be able to identify where fears come from and how we take them on. We also need to be able to deal with the symptoms and sensations of the fear. And when you're suffering with this, I used to always say I just want to get rid of the symptoms and sensations first. But knowing how and where that fear comes from helps us to dismantle everything, helps us to pull everything apart. And then we also need to reframe things. We need to change how things are going to go forward. What my focus is, my primary focus with this series of videos, is I want to help you dismantle these fears. I want to help identify these fears to show people, because what happens is fears end up building on top of each other, and they get tied in with each other, and it becomes very overwhelming, and it becomes very difficult to separate them and to know even what we're fearful for anymore. I mean, for instance, let's face it, since we are going to primarily focus on what's happened since the beginning of the pandemic event, most people probably started out fearful that they were going to get sick. Then there came the lockdowns and the isolation. So then we had separation anxiety, we had loneliness, we had depression, we had fears, people fearing that they were never going to see their loved ones again. And then we had the loss of jobs, the loss of money, and everything has become more and more and more compounded. I am going to be addressing so many of these issues. They are all very relevant. You may feel though some of the stuff I talk about seems way off topic, but it's not. It's not. There is so much going on in the world. A lot of it is really, really, really amazing stuff. But we do have to get beyond this fear. We need to rise up above this fear. We need to quell these fears, and we need to lift this blanket of fear off of this planet, because it is literally now like a very dark cloud that is blanketing the planet, and people can't find their way up from beneath it. So please keep an open mind. Please, when you hear anything that I have to say, if it's new to you, take the time to think about it. I am not asking anybody to believe 100% what I say, but what I do want to do is I want to inspire people to look outside the box. Like I said, typically fear, anxiety, stress, anything like that is being looked at as though it's all in the head, whether chemical imbalance in the brain or the way we think. That's been the old system way of thinking. We've often been told, nearly always been told, that it's hereditary. And again, this is another thing I have a massive issue with, because it makes it sound as though we have no control over our recovery, over being able to get from under this, but we can, and I intend to help you with that. So I am going to end this video now. I am going to keep these videos, the rest of the videos, relatively short and sweet. Please really think about what I tell you and show you, and try this stuff on for yourself. See if it works. A lot of this is going to be very different to what you may have heard. So refrain from judgment, as in, instead of looking to find ways to defend the beliefs that you already have an open mind to what I have to say, and see how it fits in with the big picture. So with that said, I hope that you stay safe, and I hope that I can help you rise above the fears and to quell these fears and dispel these fears. And please share this information. Anything that you find is of interest and that helps you. If you know anybody that's suffering, please share this information. This is such a huge issue on the planet right now. It is probably way worse than it's ever been in history, and we need to help each other. We need to lift each other's spirits, and I'm going to give you lots of tips and tools on how to do that. So I will end this video right now, and I will see you in the next video. Don't forget, this series is called Powering Down the Fear Machine. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.